Could a country's wild Bitcoin gamble wreck your personal investments, or will it create this kind of crypto paradise if you're quick enough to join them? See, El Salvador became the first country to make Bitcoin legal tender, but this is only the beginning of their plans that include a Bitcoin city and Bitcoin volcano. Yet, this is an economy on the brink of ruin with a credit rating that's worse than my weird Uncle Paul. Sorry, Paul. Before we discuss how this could impact you, we need to understand how El Salvador ended up in this situation. Like a few other Latin countries, they used the US dollar as their national currency, but they made a major switch in 2021, turning Bitcoin into legal tender as well. This meant that it could be used freely in the country without tax, and stores must accept it. They're required to accept Bitcoin. But why make this move? To understand this, we need to jump back to an unlikely story. Mike Peterson, just this guy from California. He went surfing in El Salvador almost 20 years ago. The dude liked it so much that he stuck around to do his typical surfing stuff, hanging 10, tombstoning, and receiving a multi-million-dollar donation from a mysterious source that turned a tiny remote village into a Bitcoin paradise. The anonymous donor was an early Bitcoin adopter who said that the money must remain in Bitcoin. So Mike helped get the Bitcoin beach wallet developed in 2019. The aim here was to improve the lives of locals and create employment along the coast, and the results so far suggest it could actually be working. This set El Salvador down the path towards Bitcoin freedom. Then an unlikely crypto enthusiast, Nayib Bukele, became the country's president through an anti-corruption slogan. Skip forward to 2021 and El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as a currency. This was a controversial decision. Of course, crypto lovers loved it. Others hated it. See, the government's overwhelming power meant there was no real political debate whether to make this happen or not, and there's countless conspiracies as to why. I'll explain those in a minute. But the problems essentially started right away. El Salvador spent about $200 million buying Bitcoin at $52,000. 24 hours later, the price already fell to $43,000. President Bukele has since bought the dip, purchasing 500 more Bitcoin at an average price of just over $30,000. They're in deep and down about 30%, and this is big money in El Salvador. Many want them to end this before it gets worse. The IMF has told the country to stop using Bitcoin because they can't get conventional loans if they use this system. Fitch has reduced their credit rating to a disastrous CCC. Their current sovereign bonds are plummeting in value as many fear bankruptcy, and then add on massive arrests and gang warfare, and you have this crazy uphill battle. And Bukele is turning to the solution that he knows best: more Bitcoin and more bonds. But hold on, how has El Salvador's crypto rollout been for locals? The people that this whole thing is supposed to benefit. A quarter of Salvadorans live in poverty and up to 70% are unbanked. In theory, this could help them manage their money and join the digital revolution. Everyone in the country got a digital wallet right away. This is known as Chivo. And I looked this up, and it either means goat or cool, depending on the dictionary you use, and I'm not sure which one is better. Chivo hasn't been the greatest success. This is despite the fact that every Cool Goat wallet had a free $30 sitting in it for every citizen, which is a great idea to get people to start using it, but that didn't solve everything. Jose Bonilla was one of the first people to get the app. After working through some technical issues, losing $25 in a sale at his shoe shop, and finding out that the nearest Bitcoin ATM was way too far away, he decided to never use the app again. Then there's Cynthia, who waited over a month to open her Chivo wallet. Well, she was too late because someone had already beaten her to it and used her ID number to grab her $30. And this was very common at launch. And those are the type of people that need to be convinced to try this again for the system to work whatsoever. Now, what about Bitcoin Beach? How is that doing? Well, El Zante has a population of 3,000, and the fact that businesses have to accept Bitcoin has made it kind of a hit with travelers. Foreign visitors love it, and that's helping to boost tourism. Numbers are actually up 30% across the country, which is great. The project has even expanded to other villages. Good news so far. It feels like it might be the start of something big, but it hasn't yet truly changed the lives of the locals as far as I can tell. Vendors in El Zante complain about the ATM being too far away and system bugs making them lose sales. For a country bigger than New Jersey, El Salvador has only 200 Bitcoin ATMs. But the biggest problem is volatility. These vendors aren't rich investors who can afford to dabble in cryptos. When they sell a tasty pupusa or tripe soup, they can't afford to see a percentage of their money just disappear due to volatility. Now, the government has done some things to help in this issue, like allowing instant conversions from Bitcoin to US dollars so citizens, they don't have to worry so much about volatility. And in the future, we may see stablecoins used rather than actual dollars for this conversion. But like many of the deals of this scheme, the details aren't very clear. So is the future bright or bleak for El Salvador? Bukele isn't the sort of president who backs down. He's called himself the world's coolest dictator, which I think he's being ironic about, but I'm not totally sure. Either way, he's doubled down on crypto and unveiled some grand plans for the future. They announced Bitcoin City. The goal is to be this futuristic, zero-emission, virtually tax-free Bitcoin paradise. Sounds perfect, right? Basically just a bunch of bros standing around showing each other NFTs, discussing the intrinsic value of their girlfriends. But I do have one question. How could the suffering Salvadoran economy fund such an ambitious project? One word. Volcanoes. You forgot about those volcanoes, didn't you? Also bonds, many more bonds. Now I know that their current bonds have crashed in value, but these aren't normal bonds. They're Bitcoin Volcano bonds, and their potential return is linked to the crypto market. Bukele wants to raise $1 billion by selling these bonds based on this exciting, somewhat questionable vision of a brilliant crypto future. Half of the money will be used to build Bitcoin City, next to a volcano that will of course power its Bitcoin mining. The other half will be used to buy more Bitcoin. At this point, I started to get the impression that these plans were sort of getting made up as they went along. I even read that the president promised to give permanent residency for anyone who paid them 3 Bitcoin. This then changed to $100,000. Now, why volcanoes? Well, El Salvador has them. 23 of them. And they actually provide about 20% of the country's energy. Recently, they ran a trial where 300 computers were set up near a volcano to mine Bitcoin, and it worked. They mined about $269 with it. But also, of course it worked. They were using electricity to run these computers, and that's pretty well proven at this point. The real key is the cost of this energy. Using cheap, renewable volcanic energy to mine Bitcoin could be really clever. However, I did some digging, and it isn't exactly clear how much cheaper this would make mining. Currently, El Salvador produces energy at 13 to 15 cents per kilowatt hour, which is about 3 times the average cost of Bitcoin mining. And that's not their only problem. Investors just don't seem to be interested in volcano bonds for some reason, and the program has been delayed several times. So what does the future hold? Let's start with the positive. What's the best thing that could happen? Imagine this all comes to fruition. The volcano bonds sell and utopia is built. Bitcoin is trading at $1 million. El Salvador is one of the richest countries in the world. Maybe we'd all want to live there. Kind of sounds like a place I'd consider living. But what about the citizens? The thing is, the average resident doesn't hold a lot of Bitcoin. In fact, it seems like they try to convert to cash whenever possible. This means that while the government gets rich, there won't be a direct line to residents' wealth. But of course, over time, this would ideally trickle down to the people through government spending, new business, and tourism. But if that were to happen, the next big step would be for the government to diversify out of Bitcoin, as to not be too reliant. I'm reminded of Venezuela in picturing this utopia and their oil riches. They struck black gold in Venezuela and were one of the richest countries in the world. However, they became too reliant on oil. Combine that with a questionable government and the economy fell apart. So if this bet plays out, El Salvador must diversify. If this bet plays out, all of our crypto holdings will flourish thanks to the credibility that this will give. Now, what about the absolute worst that could happen? Okay, what's the second worst thing that could happen? A Bitcoin crash. A big enough crash means El Salvador defaults on its current bonds, and the odds of anyone buying a volcano bond essentially goes to zero. Bitcoin City, forget it. Crypto prices across the board would be affected. The negative publicity generated from a country crashing and burning due to Bitcoin investments would be massive. Skeptics would seize on the chance to criticize crypto. This would be even worse for the citizens of El Salvador who were influenced to use crypto in the first place. The country would be forced to go back to dollars, and now they would be in short supply. So this would be bad, very bad for the country. But what if market forces aren't the only problem? There's countless conspiracy theories online attempting to explain why El Salvador would make such radical moves in the first place. Some suggest that it's some kind of tether scheme. See, about a quarter of all Salvadorans live in the US and they send billions back home every year. The theory goes that El Salvador is incentivizing citizens to use tether stablecoins instead of US dollars to send this money. Others whisper about money laundering. Even more point to the mysterious team of Venezuelan consultants who are said to be behind this entire plan. So what's the most likely outcome? Based on the evidence, it seems unlikely to me that Bitcoin City ever sees the lights of day. As much as I'd love to see this happen, I mean, I love a bold experiment as much as the next guy, but I just don't hold out that much hope for this or the project changing the lives of ordinary Salvadorans, at least not anytime soon. Some people will make money from this, but they'll be the big investors, politicians, large businesses, and those who deal with a lot of tourists. The thing is, part of this bet is banking on other countries to get on board the Bitcoin train. And while others certainly will, these will be countries that are generally struggling and don't have their own currencies. See, the problem is thriving governments have no incentive to accept Bitcoin as an official currency because governments can just print more of their own currencies, but they can't print more Bitcoin. So why would they adopt something that they have less control over? It just doesn't make sense. Now, if you've watched this and you're wondering how money even works in the first place, I got you covered. Check out this video on screen, it's absolutely illuminating.